Hi, trust you're doing great, both on the job and off the job. Today, I bring you a DIY pack, do it yourself pack on succession and career development planning. This pack comes with editable framework, tools, templates, manuals, guides, you name it. Beyond all of this as well, it comes with a voice recording to guide you. So let's quickly run through what we have in the pack. I think it's also important that I mention that you can access the full pack in the link to access the full pack is provided in the description box below. So just let's quickly run through what we have in the pack. So what we have here is the framework. The framework is editable, and this is, if I can put it like this, the nexus of everything that you'll be doing when it comes to setting up your succession planning for your organization. It starts from identifying to you reviewing things, design, execution, and monitoring. So if you go through it properly, you understand. You can see that there's a voice recording explaining details about the framework. So what I can also say is that you can decide to go beyond these 5 stages and you be creative. Theories and models are good, but again, you also need to apply yourself to be able to solve peculiar challenges within your organization. So in the deck, you'll find this. It is editable. You can click into any of these boxes. You can make adjustments. You can type into the text box. Just feel free, enjoy it, and you can customize it for your organization. So what is succession planning without roles of interest, mission critical roles, whatever you want to call them? It is important that you identify your roles of interest, except probably you work in an organization whereby you have fewer unique jobs, maybe 7-8 unique jobs. But even at that, when there's a change in direction of business, when strategy objectives changes, there are some jobs that becomes the focal point. So it is very, very important that when you're working on succession plan, you need to identify your roles of interest, because you can't focus on all the jobs at the same time, especially when you work in a place whereby unique jobs could go into their hundreds. So for the tool that was designed for this purpose, for the purpose of identifying roles of interest, 2 distinct areas were focused on: skills value and skills distinctiveness. Now, for skills value, the focus is what value does a skill brings to the table. Now, when you look at the running of an organization, some things are very, very important in the many activities that we do on a daily basis. So what are those things that are important? So those elements are being built into this tool under skills value. While under skills distinctiveness, what makes a job unique in itself within the context of your organization? So to drive this, elements such as vision, mission, strategy objectives, uniqueness of a role to the company, labor market availability, and things like that were considered. So if you look closely, you will see that there's also a voice recording here that provides some explanation into what we have here. So with these two distinct areas, a tool was designed for the purpose of identifying roles of interest or mission critical role or critical roles, as the case may be. So this is what the tool for identifying roles of interest looks like. This tool was designed based on the 2 distinct areas mentioned earlier on. And to deploy this tool, recommendation here is you want to look at committee approach or even a close 360-degree approach. This has been discussed further, or discussed further in other parts of this DIY pack. Now, I think it's also important that I state that that's why it's editable. You can edit to suit your organization. which is very, very important, which I will recommend. So this is what the tool looks like. It also comes with a voice recording, and you can easily click on the buttons there to have access to the editable tool itself. So the tool you saw earlier on is the front end for identifying roles of interest. Now this is the back end. By the time you deploy the front end and you get feedbacks from respondents, a back end has been created whereby you come to impute every feedback provided, and there is a scoring to it and a plotting whereby you can see the different distribution of roles based on their criticality, from important to ultra critical. So I mean, it's a beautiful tool, and when you speak to it, it makes sense to whoever you are presenting your case to. So when you're done with identifying your roles of interest, your mission critical roles or your critical roles, as the case may be, whatever you want to call it, the next thing will be that you look into potential successors. Now you hear me say critical roles, mission critical roles, roles of interest. You need to be mindful of your organization because you don't want to rub it in their face by referring to some jobs as very critical or mission critical. So that's why I would say I typically would go with roles of interest. I mean, they are roles of interest to us. So if you have to explain that, you can explain it in whatever way you want to explain it. Now, coming to potential successors. Now, these are successors who would now the word is potential. It's not guaranteed. They are potential successors. What you're trying to do with these guys is to use them to build your bench strength for easy transition into those roles of interest. A tool has been designed to also help you here, focusing more on potentials. How do you identify potentials? Now, to drive this or to achieve this, learning agility factor was adopted from result. So considered result agility, mental agility, change agility, people agility, self-awareness, and I included readiness. So the tool has been designed to help you identify a potential successor based on all of these parameters. The second side of the tool, which you need to provide the data, will be the performance record of these individuals that you are considering as potential successors. Recommendation is that try as much as possible to work with at least 3 cycles of performance records and take the average. It gives you a fair idea of how consistent this individual has been in terms of delivering on the job. Because if you go back to learning agility factor, you see something around the result agility, because result is very, very important. Effort is good, but again, result is also important. So this is what the tool is centered around. Here's the tool. It's been designed around learning agility. So you need to provide the other part of it, which is performance record. Again, you see the mention of committee approach, close 360-degree approach. We will get to committee approach so that you can understand what it really means. Once you click on view editable tool, you have access to the editable tool for identifying your potential successor. So the tool you saw earlier on is the front end for identifying your potential successor. A backend has also been designed riding on the 9box. Now, based on the 9box, it has been created in such a way that you can easily plot where individuals sit within the box. I believe that you're familiar with 9box. It tests for potential and performance, comparison of it, and it also provides you with guides as to how you can develop individuals within each of the boxes. A voice recording also comes with this, providing some kind of guidance. and then you can download the back end as well. It is becoming interesting at this point. Now you've identified your roles of interest, you've identified potential successors. The next thing you want to do is carry out a readiness assessment. How ready are these people that you've identified as potential successors? So some things are very important that should happen before the readiness assessment itself: role analysis, and you also need to have a comprehensive framework. Now, for your role analysis, what you're trying to do here is to understand the job itself, what the job brings to the table, the competencies and skills required to excel within that portfolio. That gives you an idea of the benchmark requirements for anyone who wish to work within that portfolio. Now, what is the role of the competency framework here? Now, the competency framework is a critical tool in human resource management because it plays an active role in performance management, recruitment, learning, development, name it. So what you have here is you have technical competencies, non-technical competencies defined across proficiency levels, and you set benchmark in terms of proficiencies for the different jobs within your organization vis-a-vis the grade levels within the organization. So wherever this job sits, which is a mission critical roles or roles of interest or critical role, it helps you to use that benchmark to assess this individual who is supposedly a potential successor for a role of interest and see where the gaps really are. So this is what it's saying, and there's a voice recording here to also speak more on each of these buckets. So what we have here is the tool for your role of interest. A here is more about identifying talent segmentation, where the job sits, the direct reports to the job, what job family does the job belongs to, the nature of the job, to what job, other job does this job provides input, what other jobs are dependent to the output of this job. The B aspect talks about the skills, competencies, and capabilities. This is where your competency framework will do a great job for you. You have C, which is the responsibilities, the levels of responsibility. Now, the levels of responsibility, you'll find it later in this deck as well. Direct and indirect dependence, future components under D, future competencies rather, because you're not just thinking about now, you're also thinking about the future, because jobs will continue to evolve. The E is more about the experience, specific project tasks, name them, educational qualification, and etc. for C. You also have a voice recording here that explains this tool itself. This is a tool, you can easily download it by clicking on the button. I did mention that you need a competency framework. So in your competency framework, you have technical competencies. These are competencies that are really required for the job to happen, or for the increment of a portfolio to really perform on the job. You have leadership competencies. You have organizational competencies, which more often are being referred to as organizational core competencies. You have soft skills. Now, all of these competencies under each of these blocks will be defined across proficiency levels. Some proficiency levels will be maybe 3, some would have 5, some would have 4. It depends on what works for you within your organization. Here you have 4 levels: basic, intermediate, advanced, and expert. There's a voice recording here that speaks to all of these things. This is a replica of a competency framework which you will have access to as part of the giveaway in this DIY pack. In there you would have access to, I think, about 44 competencies, or some competencies defined across proficiency levels. It also provides you a place where you can carry out employee assessments, carry out individual gap analysis, and you can print. You can also have a group gap analysis, and you can also print as well. There's a voice recording here that you can also listen to. So when it comes to readiness assessment, what you're trying to do is to determine who amongst the collection of potential successors are ready. Now, it is advisable that for each role of interest, try as much as possible to identify possibly 3 potential successors. Now, the truth is, by the time you carry out your readiness assessment, you will discover that each and every one of them are at different stages of readiness. As a matter of fact, there are some probably you might, or let me say each of them will be at different degrees of readiness. Amongst them, you would have a step-in. Now, the step-in basically will be someone who can easily transit into the role of interest should the need arise that the current incumbent of that role be promoted, move to other job, or maybe decides to separate from the organization. Now, the reason why you're doing this is that you don't want to be met with surprises. So within your policy, you need to establish what degree of readiness is expected for your step-in. Now, when you carry out your readiness assessment, it also helps you take informed decisions like, based on the degrees of readiness for my potential successors, I think we need to buy because our step-in is still far away from transiting into that position. Now, when you say buy, is a talent management terminology. You can do more research on that. You can buy, you can borrow, you can build. You can only build when you have the window opportunity to build some potential successors to a point whereby the potential successor can transmit into or transit into the role of interest. So there's a recording there to also speak to this. What you have here is the readiness assessment tool. What this tool looks like is it captures all the critical competencies required for a particular role of interest, and it is deployed to individuals that matters that can provide input to determine to what extent a potential successor is ready. So, I mean, clicking on the button, you have access to the editable version. So, a risk template has been designed also to help you stay on top of the risk that comes with succession planning. I mean, building your bench strength. There are some things you need to pay close attention to. The going performance rating of your potential successors. Now, when it comes to succession planning, it's not about friends within the workplace. There shouldn't be nepotism, favoritism, and all of those things, because it's the future of the organization that you are toiling with. It's the future of the organization that you are trying to focus on. So the going performance rating of the individual is something that you don't want to joke with. Availability period. Now, when it comes to availability period, for each of those roles of interest, there are incumbents. And when it comes to availability, a lot of things can play out. For someone who is the incumbent, how close is the person to your retirement age? In terms of effort, ability, physical needs, and all of those things, mental alertness, is the person still at that point whereby value can still be delivered? Now, when you look at all of this, you also compare it with the individual who is likely going to be a potential successor. Do you have the luxury of time to create that handshake, moving that person who is a potential successor to a satisfiable point where he or she can easily transit into the position? It's very important. Hence the reason why you start talking about buy. Maybe we don't have the period because the incumbent will not be available for in the next 2 years, the increment will probably won't be available again for different reasons. And the person who should be a step in is still far away from becoming a credible candidate to step in into that position. So you need to take that decision to either buy to borrow, because build, you can't really achieve it, because if you're going to build from what you have done with your individual development plan, which we'll still talk about, it shows that this person can only be ready in the next 4 or 5 years. So you don't have the luxury of time. The current age of your, for instance, the current age of your potential successor is also very important. Now, if you're picking someone who is to be a potential successor and you look at the age, the person is just probably very close to retirement as well, or the person is even older than the incumbent of the role of interest. So these are things that you need to consider. The successor's readiness window, which I've tried to explain earlier on. Now, you say from your readiness assessment, you discover that this person is let's say 60% ready, and you look at the job and you look at the development plan that has been created for this individual. From a realistic point of view, it would require maybe 5-6 years for this person to be able to transit into the role of interest. And from your own planning and the availability of the current incumbent, you don't have more than 2 years. That's a red flag. So that is what the risk chart is focused on. And there's a voice recording there that you can also listen to. So what you have here is the risk chart, and it's been well designed to help you make sense of your situation when it comes to the readiness of your potential successors vis-a-vis the situation of things with the incumbent of those rules of interest and other parameters within the organization. I think it's also important that I state that beyond the areas of risk identified there are more. So feel free to explore more and see how you can also customize them into this template as well. So you're ready to move into designing your readiness plan for all the potential successors. Now, at the point of assessment, you've assessed different individuals, and you've discovered that each of them are at different stages of readiness. That means that for every individual that is to help build that would be a part of your bench strength, you need to have a development plan that is tailored to them, because there are different degrees of readiness. Now, your development plan would come with different kinds of interventions based on what you want, or skill set or competence you want them to build or to acquire. In your individual development plan, you will have things like activities tied around mentoring, because you believe that mentoring is what would make it happen. Perhaps being mentored by someone who has occupied the role of interest before now, or the incumbent of the role of interest. I think it's also important to state here that in terms of some of these interventions, you need to also be aware of the culture of your organization, so that you don't go creating problems for yourself. You have job rotation, you have coaching, you have shadowing, you have classroom learning, task project engagement, secondment, enlargement, enrichment of portfolios. So during the period in which the potential successor would go through all of this, you are fine-tuning that person for the purpose of readiness for easy transition when the time comes. There's also a voice recording here that you can listen to. So this is the tool for individual readiness development plan. You can download this as well. What you have here is a sample of a policy document on individual readiness development plan, precisely for the role of a chief executive officer that was executed for a client. You can download and also edit, though it's been edited so that it doesn't give away the details of the client or organization. So what you have here is the readiness development tracker, because as you're doing all of these beautiful things, you need to track. So when you track, it helps you know the situation with your bench strength activities within the organization. Here you have access to a complementary competency framework with 44 competencies that has been defined across 4 proficiency levels. You can just click on the download and you will have access to it. On this tool, you can carry out analysis and also print reports for individuals and group. So I did mention committee approach earlier on, and it's very straightforward. Bringing people who know one or two things about the job into the room for them to also be a part of the committee that would help to chart the course as far as succession, as far as building the bench strength for a particular role of interest is concerned. So in this committee, they play active role in the role analysis, in the identification of potential successors, in the assessment of potential successors, which is the readiness assessment. Also active role in developing the individual readiness development plan. They are very important. Now, there is only there's a flip side to this, because what it means is that for every unique job within your organization, you need to have a committee. So if you have 13 unique jobs that you're working on, then it's good for you to have 13 committees, but this can be tasking. So it's just a recommendation, but you can also think of better ways of making things happening within your organization. There is a voice recording here that speaks more to committee approach. Here you can download the committee guide. It guides you in setting up your committee. So you have the line manager of the incumbent of the role of interest, the previous incumbent of the role of interest. You have an HR representative who facilitates and coordinates the whole process. You have a dependent portfolio, a portfolio that depends on the role of interest. So obviously, whoever is the incumbent of that independent role would know more than a little about the role of interest. Then you also have the incumbent of the role of interest. So you can download the committee guide here. Another approach that you can adopt is a 360-degree evaluation. I mean, a 360 degree is a common, a well-known approach for assessments. So you can look into that. There's a voice recording here to provide more details. Here you can download the succession planning manual, which provides guidance from start to finish, the roles of different individuals within the whole process. So you can download it here. Here, the pitfalls of succession planning was discussed. Amongst the many pitfalls of succession planning, we have zero commitment from the top management. So you want your top management to be committed to everything as far as succession planning is concerned, because you need them all the way. Poor data mining and analytics, because you'll be working with data. You need to have access to data. If you don't collect data, then you need to start thinking of how to collect data and make meanings out of your data. Your organizational culture is also important, because you have heard me mention organizational culture, different situations and different points. Absence of sensitivity to company's peculiarities, because there are peculiarities. You can't just adopt pick from somewhere and then just roll it out. It has to be peculiar to your company. The capability of those who will be working closely with you. The policies and procedures also needs to be watertight. Compensation and welfare, because this is very important, because when you're talking about succession planning, you also need to look at your attrition rates, the reason why people are leaving, because you don't want a situation whereby you spend a lot on getting people ready, and before you're even done with the development plan, they are already out of the organization. So compensation and welfare, hence the reason why commitment from top management is also very important. The reputation of the organization, situations whereby you don't have a window period that allows you to build, then you need to bring people from outside. What's the reputation of your organization like outside there? So these are things that are very important, and many more that are pitfalls to succession planning. If you can listen to everything that's been discussed here. And finally, levels of responsibility. When we were discussing uh, the role analysis, there is a section there under job responsibility that you have levels of responsibility. So taking this from project management, from task, supervisory, manager to visionary and strategy described there, all you need to do is just pick which one is applicable to each element of the role within that portfolio, and you'll be good. There's also a voice recording there. So on that note, I think that is all concerning the pack. You can download this pack as it is by clicking on the link provided in the descriptive or description box below. You have access to all the templates, all the templates mentioned in this pack, and you have access to the editable version of this deck itself. Thank you for listening, and I'm wishing you the best.